Hey, I have a bad news. One day or another, our time will come. Yup, one day we're all going to pass on. But hey, the upside is that we're still here right now, so kudos to us for making it this far. Today, we're going to talk about men of power. Yes, I said men of power because, until today, no woman has reached the supreme position of President of the United States. But reality may prove me wrong in a few weeks' time. Who knows? Here's a headline for you. 39 U.S. presidents have passed away. Some have been gone for quite a while. In today's video, we're going to dive into the way every U.S. president has met their end. I'd argue that being the president is one of the riskiest jobs out there. A full 18% of them passed away while serving, and 9% were assassinated. In fact, there was a stretch of around 122 years when 8 presidents died while still in office. Sure, you could argue that most presidents are a bit older when they step into office, and that's totally valid. But considering the dangers, it's no surprise that the president now has an entire team of Secret Service agents numbering in the thousands, and a dedicated medical unit at the White House for all their health concerns. It's a tough and stressful gig. Just check out some before and after pics. Now, most of us hope for a peaceful end, like passing away in our sleep, right? Sadly, quite a few presidents had brutal, agonizing deaths. And while we're on the subject, we'll also explore their supposed last words, some of which, I gotta say, aren't exactly profound. We're going to mix it up by discussing presidents in order of their death rather than their time in office. So let's start with George Washington, our very first president, who also happened to be the first to pass away. He likely died from epiglottitis, an inflammation of that little flap at the base of the tongue that keeps food out of your windpipe. Unfortunately, the doctors treating him didn't really know what they were dealing with, so they resorted to bloodletting. They ended up draining about 40% of his blood before he passed. He was 67 at the time, and his last words were simply, "'Tis well." Next up, Thomas Jefferson, our third president, was the second to die, followed by John Adams, our second president. In a crazy coincidence, both passed away on the same day, July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of American independence. The two had a long friendship that dated back to their leadership roles in the Continental Congress during the Revolution. However, they later became fierce political rivals for a while. In their later years, though, they rekindled their friendship and wrote letters to each other often. Jefferson's death was slow and painful. He was bedridden for months. The official cause was a series of severe infections in his bloodstream, including kidney failure that caused urine to mix with his blood. On top of that, he had pneumonia. His final words were, "No, doctor, nothing more." But reportedly, he also said, "This is the fourth." John Adams, on the other hand, passed away suddenly from heart failure. He was unaware that Jefferson had already died a few hours earlier, and his last words included, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Jefferson was 83 and Adams was 90. Believe it or not, the fourth U.S. president to pass away also died on July 4th. No kidding. James Monroe, our fifth president, succumbed to a combination of tuberculosis and heart failure exactly 5 years after Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. He was 73 at the time. His supposed last words were about his good friend, the fourth president, James Madison. He's quoted as saying, "I regret that I should leave this world without again beholding him," though there isn't concrete proof that he actually said it. As for Madison, he passed away nearly 5 years later, on June 28, 1836. He almost made it to July 4th, too, but his doctors didn't quite manage to extend his life. They even tried giving him stimulants to push him a few more days. He died from heart failure at the age of 85. Apparently, When one of his nieces asked how he was feeling, he replied, "Nothing more than a change of mind, my dear. I always talk better lying down." Those were likely his final words. William Henry Harrison, the next president to die, was the first to pass while still in office, only a month into his presidency. He was 68. There's a popular story that he caught a cold that turned into pneumonia because he gave a long inaugural speech in cold weather without a coat. While it's true he gave a lengthy 2-hour speech and didn't wear a jacket, he didn't actually fall ill until over 3 weeks later. Pneumonia was the official cause of death, but in 2014, experts speculated it might have been typhoid fever, caused by contaminated water. His last words were, "Sir, I wish you to understand the true principles of the government. I wish them carried out. I ask nothing more." Next up, Andrew Jackson passed away on June 8, 1845, at the age of 78. After surviving a pretty wild life, including duels and illnesses, it was heart failure that finally claimed him. He also suffered from edema, which caused a buildup of fluid in his body. As he lay on his deathbed, surrounded by his family, his last words were, "What is the matter with my dear children? Have I alarmed you? Oh, do not cry. Be good children, and we will all meet in heaven." 3 years later, John Quincy Adams, the 6th president, died at age 80 after suffering a stroke. He had continued serving in Congress right up until the end. His last words were reportedly, "This is the last of Earth. I am content." Interestingly, future President Abraham Lincoln was present when Adams passed away. Then there was James Polk, who died far too young. At just 53, he succumbed to cholera, likely caused by drinking contaminated water, a little over 3 months after leaving office. It was shocking how quickly his health deteriorated, considering he had been so energetic and driven as president. He passed away with his wife Sarah by his side. His final words were, "I love you, Sarah. For all eternity, I love you." Zachary Taylor was the 2nd president to die while in office, barely a year and a half after his inauguration. He died from gastroenteritis, or what we'd call the stomach flu today. There were rumors he had been poisoned, but tests on his remains in 1991 found no evidence of that. Still, some historians haven't ruled out the possibility. His last words were, "I am about to die. I expect the summons very soon. I have tried to discharge all my duties faithfully. I regret nothing, but I am sorry that I am about to leave my friends." In 1862, during the height of the Civil War, 2 former presidents passed away. First was John Tyler, the 10th president, in January, followed by Martin Van Buren, the 8th president, in July. Not on the 4th, though. Tyler, who died from a stroke at the age of 71, is said to have sipped some brandy before telling his doctor, "I am going." When the doctor responded, "I hope not, sir," Tyler replied, "Perhaps it is best." Fun fact, he's the only U.S. president buried under a Confederate flag. As for Van Buren, he died from heart failure brought on by bronchial asthma at age 79, having witnessed 8 presidents take office after him. If Jimmy Carter lives a bit longer, he might just break that record. Van Buren's last words were allegedly, "There is but one reliance." Then came the first president to be assassinated in office, Abraham Lincoln. While he and his wife were enjoying a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., John Wilkes Booth snuck up behind him and shot him in the head at point-blank range. Lincoln was laughing at the time. He slipped into a coma for 8 hours before passing away the next morning at the age of 56. As for Lincoln's final words, one account claims they were, "She won't think anything about it," said in response to his wife, Mary, asking what Miss Harris, a friend of theirs, would think of her clinging to him. 3 years later, James Buchanan died at the age of 77 from respiratory failure and rheumatic gout. Some claim his last words were, "O Lord God Almighty, as thou wilt." But I'm not entirely convinced. It seems a little too dramatic for his style, if you ask me. Next, Franklin Pierce passed away in 1869 from stomach inflammation after suffering for years from liver cirrhosis, worsened by his heavy drinking. Alcohol essentially killed him. Adding to the tragedy, he died alone with no family around, which is why we don't know his last words. He was 64 at the time. Millard Fillmore followed, passing away at 74 after suffering a stroke. It's said his final words were, "The nourishment is palatable," apparently referring to a bowl of soup he had just eaten. While I'm skeptical that these were truly his last words, it's amusing to imagine they were. A year later, Andrew Johnson also died from a stroke at 66. At the time of his death, he was serving as a U.S. Senator from Tennessee and was the only living former president. His exact last words are unclear, so I won't guess. James Garfield was the second president to be assassinated while in office. Sadly, with better medical care, he might have survived. 4 months into his presidency, Charles Guiteau, a mentally unstable man, shot him twice, once in the back and once in the arm. Garfield's immediate reaction was, "My God, what is this?" However, these weren't his last words. After the shooting, Garfield began to recover, but the situation worsened when his doctors, using unsterilized instruments and hands, caused a serious infection while trying to remove the bullet. 2 months later, Garfield died from septic shock. His final words, spoken to his friend General David Swaim, were, "Oh, Swaim, can't you stop this? Oh, Swaim." He was only 49. Ulysses S. Grant, at 63, also experienced a drawn-out, painful end due to throat cancer, which he had battled for about a year. His final word? Simply, water. Chester Arthur passed the following year at 57 after suffering a stroke. His last words remain unknown. Well, folks, that's all for part 1. I know, you're on the edge of your seat, but don't worry. Part 2 is just around the corner, so hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and maybe, just maybe, I'll release it faster. Stay tuned for the thrilling conclusion, or at least something kind of close to thrilling. See you soon.